Professional Master Matt Jensen. I'm a chess coach, and I'm here today with Lula.
Hi, I'm Lula. I'm a chess.com streamer. I've been playing chess for about a year and a half, and I'm 1500 rated.
And in today's video series, we will be going through 5 of Lula's games. A couple of them were online games on chess.com. We're going to talk through key takeaways, use the game review feature on chess.com, and give you guys some things to learn from that you can implement in your own games. So this is Lula's game, online chess.com game, and you played 1c4, the English opening. So tell me, Lula, a little about your white repertoire. What do you like to play?
Yeah, so I was playing b4 actually, but c4 is a little bit more solid, I think, and I'm kind of trying to integrate some d4, c4 Catalan style systems, but at the moment I'm just playing c4, kind of c4 g3, which I quite like. It's quite flexible. But if it's like a serious game, I'm going to play c4. If it's online blitz, I might play b4. If it's a serious game I don't want to prep for, I'll probably play b4 as well. But yeah, I like playing flank openings and playing on the queen side.
Okay, that's good to know, because coming up, you talk about in one of these positions you got a little bit uncomfortable. So we can sort of talk about the pawn structure and which side of the board to play on.
Yes.
So oftentimes in the English, these opening lines can transpose into a d4 opening or sometimes even an e4 opening. And that's what happens here after d5. So you decided to take pawn takes in d4. So how do you feel about this structure, the Carlsbad pawn structure?
So I'm not super familiar with it because, like I say, I don't really have much experience playing d4 openings. I know this kind of transposes into an exchange Queen's Gambit declined, which is not something that I really know, which is why I decided to take, because I thought it would simplify things. But I'm not super comfortable here already. So
yeah, so this is called the Carlsbad structure, and that's when white has these 2 pawns on the queen side, black has these 3 pawns, and then a pawn on d5, pawn on d4. So there's a couple different ways you can play this, and one of them you do mention in your notes. You can kind of go for this f3 e4 plan, but you can also play on the queen side flank, which is something that you've noted that you already like to do, and you can go for what's called the minority attack and play a3 b4. And there's a pretty good chess.com lesson on this on the Carlsbad structure that we'll link to. That can be pretty instructive. But the nice thing about this is when you play the English, anytime your opponent goes e6, d5, you can just take that pawn on d5 and go right into this structure where you know you're comfortable. So your opponent kind of develops naturally, and you get your king side pieces out. Now here, this is kind of a big decision in terms of how you want to play the position. So what do you think about this knight on g1? Where do you want to get him developed?
So I know that if it goes to f3, it usually means that you go for the minority attack. Is that right? And
That's
then if
right.
it goes to e2, it's more about pushing like f3, e4, I think. But again, I don't really have much experience in these. I decided to go for knight e2. And basically, because this was an online rapid game, I'm kind of trying to become more aggressive as a player, because I'm a very solid player, but I'm not very aggressive. So I'm kind of forcing myself to play these positions in a way that I probably wouldn't tend towards. And for me, knight e2 is that.
Okay, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, if you like to be more of a wild player or if you tend to play more solid. So it sounds like solid, but trying to transition to a bit more tactical.
Yeah, I'm really trying, because I think that kind of attacking and tactics are one of my bigger weaknesses. So that's why I'm trying to put myself into these positions where I'm not so familiar and I'm a little bit uncomfortable.
Okay, so this is a nice way to play for that more aggressive structure, because you can play, either f3 or e4 like you mentioned, or what you ended up doing is actually not bad. You play h3 and g4, and all of a sudden these pawns are coming at the black king, and this can be very scary for black, especially in a faster time control like you're playing here online. And you mentioned here you weren't sure about going for a3, b4, but I think that's something you could add to your repertoire, like maybe have both options where you can go for that queen side play or king side play.
I think I would definitely be more comfortable doing that in a classical game, going for the minority attack.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel with the opposite side castling positions? Because in the next couple of moves, you get your king castled queen side. What do you think about this?
Yes, there's a kind of a running joke on my stream that Lula chess is the same rules as normal chess, but without long castles as an option. So I never long castle. But again, I'm really trying to push myself to try new things, and for me, long castling is one of them. I mean, I have friends who always long castle every game, and they love playing these positions. For me, this is completely out of my comfort zone. But I figured also here, because I've played h3, g4, castling short feels a bit weird with the pawns pushed in front of the king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That opens up these squares in front of your king, right? Potential weaknesses.
Exactly.
So what I like about queenside castle here, even though if you kind of look at the chart, you know, when you queenside castle, it does start to give black an advantage. But sometimes we have to kind of look beyond what Stockfish says, you know, because we're not all super grandmasters playing perfect chess. You're trying to work on these attacking, aggressive positions, opposite side castling. And I think this is a great way to do it. Play it in your games. Maybe Stockfish says minus 0.5. That's not a big deal, right? We still have a lot of chess to play, and you can work on how do you attack in these positions. So I like this a lot. So now after a5, f4, we see the pawn storms going on both flanks. So what kind of things do you have to think about when it comes to opposite side castling?
So I guess king safety is probably number one. I think here for black's attack, I was much more afraid of them pushing kind of c5 and b5 rather than the a pawn, especially because I haven't even played king b1. I wasn't too scared here. But yeah, that is something that I found in these opposite side casting positions, is usually my king is in a little bit of a precarious situation, which does make me uncomfortable at times.
Yeah, so these kind of positions, like, it adds a lot of variance to the position. So if you think of a solid position, one player has the advantage, and really they kind of hold that advantage for a long time. Whereas these positions, opposite side castling, some players get discouraged because they'll look at a chart and they'll see a whole bunch of up and down spikes, and they just think like, oh, I'm a really bad player. Look at all these blunders that the game report says. But really you have to take account, what does the position look like? And if the position is really tactical and crazy, there's going to be a lot more of those up and down spikes. So that's completely normal, is one thing I wanted to mention. Okay, so now let's go forward a couple moves. I like what you do here. You clear out the bishop, right? So these pawns are more free to move up the board. Black takes back, g5, and you're coming at the black king. And one thing you can do here, so the eval says 1.5 for black. Do you ever flip the board and try to look at it from your opponent's point of view?
I have done that a little bit recently, yeah, and I think this looks kind of scary for black.
Yeah, I agree. Like, look at these pawns coming at the king. Black has to figure out, how do they deal with that pressure? And you mentioned in some of your notes the word pressure and not knowing how to apply pressure. But what I like about a lot of these schemes you sent me is you do exactly that. And maybe you don't always know you're doing it, but you're applying pressure to your opponent's positions. So 17h4. You mentioned here 1 speed, 1 gear.
1 speed, 1 gear. I'm really trying to attack. Yeah, I guess I don't have that many pieces over on the king side though.
Yeah, and I think there's a good point here. If you look at the two attacks, whose attack do you feel is faster?
I think if black plays c5, which they definitely can, I think I kind of have to respond. But yeah, I guess I'm not hitting the black king for another couple of moves.
Yeah, so one thing you can do here, if you feel your opponent's attack is faster and they're attacking on the flank, what's the quickest way to counter a flank attack?
With a flank attack? I don't
Sometimes,
know.
but usually...
Or playing in the center?
It's playing in the center, yeah.
In
So the center is kind of the fastest route to all sides of the board. So if your opponent is playing, let's say, b5, b4, and you know it's coming quickly, what's a way you could counter that in a position like this?
Yeah, so I guess my only central pawn break is e4.
So let's say black takes. Which way would you take?
I would probably take with the c3 knight because it's going to get hit by the b pawn, and we also probably want to bring it over to the king side anyway.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So look at how powerful your knight is on e4, kind of targeting all these squares in black's camp. And if black goes all out for this queenside play, now you can play h4. And because you have this knight posted here, you kind of control c5, your queen controls b5. So sometimes you can use those center breaks to really slow down your opponent's attack. Or like if you're desperate to avoid their attack, you could start to go for queen trades and things like that because the center is more opened up. So let's go forward. h4, b3, or a3, b3. I like what you did here. So what's the idea with b3?
I guess I was kind of trying to make that a pawn push seem a bit pointless, kind of more like a little bit of an umbrella pawn, where I can actually just hide behind this and I've got this cozy space for my king. I think that opening it up was definitely worse, and I didn't really want to let them take and open up the files in front of my king.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you're kind of trying to control their attack, use their pawn as a shield or an umbrella pawn, like you said. So it's really good. Okay, so now your opponent plays c5, and you punish this move with tactics. I like this a lot. Knight takes d5, grabbing that free pawn. Okay, so then here, there were a couple moves where the game review says blunder.
Yeah.
So instead of knight takes e7, what could you play in this position?
Yeah, so I guess black can't actually take on e3 because we've got this x-ray on the d7 knight. And so I guess maybe we can continue to push the flank pawns and maybe play h5.
Okay, then let's say black does take, just to show the tactic.
I would say we can probably take the bishop then because we're just winning a piece, even though the bishop is not, as good.
Yeah, very good. So we're up a knight for a pawn, and if the queens come off the board, then really black has no play at all. So this should be a pretty easy conversion. So what I like about what you've done here is you've kind of set up your pieces on good squares so that the tactics can favor you as things open up, right? You have queen and rook on the open file. You have your knight in the center of the board. That's always good in tactical positions because it's really hard to calculate everything. So you want those tactics to favor you on average. So here your opponent checks you, king b1, knight to c5. And here you mentioned in your notes, I think you were a little hard on yourself. You said that you felt like kind of almost every move you were making a blunder for a short stretch here. The other one was more strategic, and this one is more of a tactical sequence. So what is it that black is going for with the knight on c5? There's a route for him.
Yes, so obviously there's the attack on the queen, but I mean, our king is starting to look a little bit vulnerable. The knight can come to e4, and then it can come to c3 and try and fork us.
And maybe even f2.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that's the big plan here for black is they really want this knight e4, knight c3 check. So that's how in this position you can maybe use tactics to find the move, but honestly, this is a really hard blunder to see. It's like you have to see, I need to sacrifice the queen to get the queen back.
Yeah, no, I think I considered this move at the time, but I wasn't sure about, first of all, if they just moved the queen. I wasn't sure where the queen was going to go. And then we would still have to move, and I didn't know kind of how I felt about that. I was also not sure if we traded queens, how safe I felt with my king, with, with the a pawn actually covering the b2 square and the rook cutting my king off completely. It was something that I think in the shorter time control, I think I'd maybe wasted some time here. It was just too much to calculate, so I went for the simpler option of moving the queen, but I don't think it was as good. Yeah.
Yeah, and your opponent does miss the critical move here, because this is a little bit hard to see for black too. It's so tempting to check with the queen, and that's what your opponent played. Knight e4 would have been a little bit stronger heading to c3. Okay, so now your king gets to that cozy square, defended by the a3 pawn and your pawns. And at this point, did your opponent offer the draw, or did you offer
My
them the
opponent
draw?
offered me a draw after they played their move, and I didn't think that their move was great, but I also knew that I was much worse before. So I kind of just took it because I was so out of my comfort zone in this game. I know that I need to be playing these positions and learning from them, but I really didn't know what to do, to be honest.
Yeah, and some coaches would say you should always play out a position like this just to learn from them. But sometimes there is that psychological aspect too, right? Like you felt bad the last 5 or 10 moves and you were just ready to shake hands and go on to the next game.
Yeah.
So that's understandable too. Okay, so then one thing I like to do just briefly at the end of each game is, what would you say were the main takeaways from the game?
Yeah, so I think that the main things that I needed to learn from this was not trading off my better superior minor piece. And then I think that I kind of tunnel visioned playing on the king side, and I missed this idea of pushing e4 and making a central break to try and counteract the counterplay for my opponent. So that's definitely something I didn't think about at all. Yeah, I think I just tunnel visioned on pushing the h pawn and the g pawn.
Yeah, those are really good, two really good takeaways. And then tell me 2 kind of positive takeaways. So those are 2 to learn from. What are 2 positive takeaways from the game? Things you did well.
I forced myself into a position that I would usually be, really uncomfortable playing. I played more aggressively than I usually would. I went for long castles. I went for an opposite side castling position. So I was pretty happy with this as kind of a practice game for trying to learn how to play these positions differently.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think you did a good job going for this kingside flank attack and putting your pieces on good squares. We saw those tactics where you were able to even sack the pawn at one point and just push the h-pawn up the board. So, well played game. I think draw was a good result, kind of back and forth.
Yes, I think it was a good result. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know if this reminds you of any of your games and leave a comment down below. We'll see you in the next video.